So recently I did a video on that ChatGPT, that new artificial intelligence product that can generate grammatically correct, it would seem grammatically correct English responses to questions. And I had mentioned that it makes some errors if one really knows the details of one's topic. But I thought I would ask it a series of questions. Actually, I asked it to generate a series of questions regarding Shin Buddhism. So I'll read a couple of the answers and also mention, the details that I think are incorrect based on my knowledge. I don't like to criticize other seekers, other Dharma friends or Dharma masters, but I guess I won't hesitate to criticize this artificial intelligence, since I don't think that it will take offense, and I don't think I would be doing any injustice to any kind of interpersonal relationship, since it's not a person. So anyway, the question is, what is the origin of Shin Buddhism and what are its teachings? So ChatGPT says, Shin Buddhism, also known as Pure Land Buddhism. Okay, I'll accept that, although really Shin Buddhism is more technically called Jodo Shinshu, or I think it would be the true sect of Pure Land Buddhism, as distinct from Jodoshu, which is Pure Land Buddhism, which was founded by Honen, Shinran's teacher. Anyhow, Shin Buddhism, also known as Pure Land Buddhism, or we'll say Jodo Shinshu or Shin Buddhism, originated in Japan, and ChatGPT said the 12th century, but of course I think it was the 13th century. Shinran, the founder, was born in the 12th century, but he did his work in the 13th century. In fact, we're now celebrating a couple of things. We're celebrating the 800th anniversary here in 2023 of the founding of the Jodo Shinshu school, which I believe was based on the point in time when Shinran completed his masterwork, the Kyogyo Shinsho, which I think was when he was about 52 years old. So he said it originated in Japan, and we'll call it in the 13th century, and was founded by the monk Shinran. And of course, this is Shinran Shonen, and we often refer to him as Venerable Shinran. And, it says in the GPT that he was a monk, but that's an interesting point. Yes, he started out as a monk in the Tendai school in Japan, which was a sect or a school based on the Lotus Sutra, which, as you know, is a scripture that I revere. But at the time, I think there was some corruption going on within that school, and also the practices were very, very difficult. You talk about path of sages or holy path as compared to the easy path. And Shinran, frankly, after about 20 years, he determined that he was not able to accomplish the kinds of tasks necessary to be a full-fledged monk, even though he really was downgrading his capabilities. He, I think, was an outstanding monk. But the point is, in his own heart and mind, he felt inadequate. So he left Mount Hiei, where the Tendai school was primarily headquartered. But the point is, as he evolved in his own understanding of the doctrine within the Pure Land school, he didn't at the end consider himself to be a monk. He said he was neither a monk nor a layman, actually. And one of the big things he did that monks did not do at that time is he married. He took a wife, a Shini. In fact, recently, my significant other, Charlotte, she recited one of Ishini's letters, which you may be interested in seeing and hearing. So while GPT refers to him as a monk, technically he was a monk for much of his life, but he ultimately became neither monk nor layman. So it goes on to say, its teachings are based on the belief in the power of the Amida Buddha who, according to tradition, made a vow to save all sentient beings and created a, quote, pure land where individuals can be reborn and eventually attain enlightenment. Well, it's not exactly a belief in the power of Amida Buddha. It's reliance on the power of Amida Buddha. In other words, it's not a conscious belief, I'm going to believe this, and because I believe it, therefore I'm going to be reborn in the Pure Land. It's entrusting in the vow that says that Amida is gifting this to me through Shinjin, through this experience of reliance, and through that sense of entrustment gifted by Amida, I can be assured that I am grasped by Amida, never to be abandoned. And so, of course, this vow being referred to as the 18th vow of the 48 vows that Dharmakara made when he was in the presence of Lokesvara Raja Buddha. And here again at the end it says, eventually attain enlightenment. You know, technically I guess we do attain enlightenment when we die and we're reborn in the Pure Land from a Shin perspective. But attain carries some connotation of self-power. And what Shinran's genius was to try to strip the doctrine of all aspects of self-power. And, you know, you heard in a recent recitation maybe that I gave on the Heart Sutra is the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara recognized there's nothing to attain. And so even within the self-power oriented schools and sects within Mahayana or Great Vehicle Buddhism, ultimately the insight is that there's nothing to attain. So GPT goes on to say, Shin Buddhism teaches that individuals can be liberated from the cycle of rebirth through faith in Amida Buddha and reciting the Nembutsu, which is the repetition of the phrase Namo Amida Butsu, I take refuge in Amida Buddha. Now again, where he says rebirth through faith, again, it's rebirth through entrustment, which is a little bit different, a nuanced kind of difference. And the important problem with this sentence is that it's not, this entrustment doesn't come about by reciting the Nembutsu and by repetition of the phrase. In other words, in the earlier form of Pure Land, namely the Jodoshu or Pure Land school, there was a certain element, and even in earlier forms than that, through some of the 7 patriarchs that Shinran pointed to, there was this notion of benefit of reciting the phrase Namo Amida Butsu over and over and over. But Shinran makes it clear that's a form of self-power. I think he talks about meditative and non-meditative kinds of practices. And that might be considered to be a non-meditative type of practice where the person feels like that they need to repeat this phrase over and over in order to, you know, be assured rebirth in the Pure Land. Not true, according to Shinran. And that was kind of an innovation on his part, in my opinion, and a further refinement he made of the Pure Land teaching. The ultimate refinement, really, because his system, as Dr. Al Bloom said, is a system of pure grace. And finally, GPT says, this practice, which again is a non-practice, Shin Buddhists don't technically really have a practice. I think Shinran felt, though, that saying the Nembutsu and experiencing Shinjin really were one and the same. And what we do, we recite the Nembutsu, but we don't do it as something we need to repetitively do, but as an expression of gratitude for the gift we've already been given. I remember, too, just again from the standpoint of repetition, that there are some schools, and I'm thinking now of a Tibetan tradition where I attended a lecture one time, and the notion was at the time of death, you need to really be focused and really need to, you know, create that connection between yourself and the Pure Land. I think in some of these schools, they would actually, as the person was dying, tie like a string around their finger and connect it up to like an Amida statue or something along that line. So again, you know, Shinran made the point, look, what if at the time of death, you know, you're in pain or you're distracted or, you know, so there's no need for some special activity at the time of death in order to be reborn in the Pure Land. At an earlier point in time, one receives that assurance as a gift from Amida simply through the process of entrustment, which itself is based on Amida's reaching out and calling to us. So all we need to do is basically hear the Dharma, hear the teaching, hear the calling, and then be assured that, we have reached the stage of non-retrogression, that we won't backslide into an earlier phase where we're not assured of this great gift of being able to be reborn in the Pure Land, become a Buddha, and then have the flexibility to come back and help others with compassion. So it says this practice of repetition is believed to bring about the individual's rebirth in the Pure Land, where the conditions are conducive to attaining enlightenment. And again, that's the Jodoshu school. That's the earlier Pure Land school, where the idea was, as I've put it, it's like being in graduate school. You go to the Pure Land, you're not immediately a Buddha, but you don't have the kinds of hindrances, the three poisons of, greed, aversion, and ignorance, that keep you from making progress on the various 52 stages of the Bodhisattva path. So you can make quick progress toward Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, or perfect enlightenment. So the bottom line criticism in this one question, and there are several questions that we could talk about, is that there's confusion between Jodoshinshu and Jodoshu, or true Pure Land Buddhism, and the Pure Land Buddha school of Honen, and the teaching of the patriarchs who talked about an easy path and talked about Amitabha Buddha prior to Honen. And throughout the Mahayana Sutras, there are references to Amitabha, or the Buddha of infinite light, light being wisdom, and the Pure Land. But again, in those sutras or Mahayana scriptures, it was more in the context of, a variety of self-power oriented practices. Well, I'm not sure how much energy I have to go on here, but the next question is, what is the role of faith and devotion in Shin Buddhism, and how is it related to the path of enlightenment? Very good questions. I'll just read this one. In Shin Buddhism, faith and devotion play a central role in the path to enlightenment. The practice of reciting the Nembutsu, which is the repetition of the phrase Namo Amida Butsu, or I take refuge in Amida Buddha, is considered to be the most important aspect of faith. This practice is believed to bring about the individual's rebirth in the Pure Land, where the conditions are conducive to attaining enlightenment. So all the all the criticisms that I made in the earlier question apply here. In Shin Buddhism, faith is understood as, and this is correct, entrusting oneself completely to Amida Buddha and his vow to save all beings. This faith is not based on intellectual understanding or logical reasoning, but rather on a deep emotional response to the compassion and grace of Amida Buddha. There again, pretty good. It is said that the faith in Amida Buddha's vow and the Nembutsu practice is the only way to reach the Pure Land and be liberated from the cycle of rebirth. Devotion is also an important aspect of Shin Buddhism. It is understood as a heartfelt expression of gratitude and love for Amida Buddha and his vow to save all sentient beings. This devotion is often expressed through rituals and practices such as reciting the Nembutsu, making offerings to Amida Buddha, and visiting temples dedicated to Amida Buddha. In summary, Shin Buddhism teaches that enlightenment is attained through faith in Amida Buddha and the recitation of the Nembutsu, which is a sign of that faith. Faith and devotion are considered essential in the path to enlightenment and liberation from the cycle of rebirth. Well, again, we could nitpick that. We are devoted, and there are manifestations of the devotion, but again, we don't want to get caught in the trap of thinking of those things that we do, whether it be rituals or offerings or incense or whatever, that those things are necessary. Those things are not necessary. No practice is necessary to attain rebirth, to gain rebirth. And I'll just close with a sort of maybe contradicting myself on the question of the use of the term faith. Shin Buddhism very much, I think, wants to distinguish itself from Christian faith, belief in the saving power of Jesus and his resurrection and so forth. But, these different religious traditions evolve in different cultures, and maybe different words, different phrases are used. But in the end, they all relate to the same fundamental human experience. And actually, GPT says it well when it says it's not based on intellectual understanding. It's not based on logical reasoning, but it's based on a deep emotional response. And we say it's a response to the compassion and grace of Amida Buddha, but it's also a response to the compassion and grace associated with the Christian narrative. So I don't have too much heartburn with use of the word faith in the context of my Shin Buddhist belief system. And there again, I say a belief system. Well, okay, it's a narrative that I have adopted, that I believe in, but my belief is not the trigger or the cause, the proximal cause of my rebirth. The anticipation of my rebirth is based on a gift that was given to me that is totally mysterious, that I honestly don't understand, but that somehow or other I know is true. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandabs. Namandabs. Namandabs.